Do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel and activate the bell button to receive all new. Space is the boundless three-dimensional extent in which objects and events have relative position and direction. Physical space is often conceived in three linear dimensions, although modern physicists usually consider it, with time, to be part of a boundless four-dimensional continuum known as space-time. The concept of space is considered to be of fundamental importance to an understanding of the physical universe. However, disagreement continues between philosophers over whether it is itself an entity, a relationship between entities, or part of a conceptual framework. Debates concerning the nature, essence and the mode of existence of space date back to antiquity. Namely, to treatises like the Timaeus of Plato, or Socrates and his reflections on what the Greeks called koura, that is space, or in the physics of Aristotle, book IV, delta in the definition of topo, that is place, or in the later geometrical conception of place as space qua extension in the discourse on place, called fi al-makan of the 11th century Arab polymath al-Hazan. Many of these classical philosophical questions were discussed in the Renaissance and then reformulated in the 17th century, particularly during the early development of classical mechanics. In Isaac Newton's view, space was absolute, in the sense that it existed permanently and independently of whether there was any matter in the space. Other natural philosophers, notably Gottfried Leibniz, thought instead that space was in fact a collection of relations between objects, given by their distance and direction from one another. In the 18th century, the philosopher and theologian George Berkeley attempted to refute the visibility of spatial depth in his essay Towards a New Theory of Vision. Later, the metaphysician Immanuel Kant said that the concepts of space and time are not empirical ones derived from experiences of the outside world, they are elements of an already given systematic framework that humans possess and use to structure all experiences. Kant referred to the experience of space in his critique of pure reason as being a subjective pure a priori form of intuition. In the 19th and 20th centuries, mathematicians began to examine geometries that are non-Euclidean, in which space is conceived as curved, rather than flat. According to Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity, space around gravitational fields deviates from Euclidean space. 4 experimental tests of general relativity have confirmed that non-Euclidean geometries provide a better model for the shape of space.
Geography is the branch of science concerned with identifying and describing places on Earth, utilizing spatial awareness to try to understand why things exist in specific locations. Cartography is the mapping of spaces to allow better navigation, for visualization purposes, and to act as a locational device. Geostatistics applies statistical concepts to collected spatial data of Earth to create an estimate for unobserved phenomena. Geographical space is often considered as land, and can have a relation to ownership usage, in which space is seen as property or territory. While some cultures assert the rights of the individual in terms of ownership, other cultures will identify with a communal approach to land ownership. While still other cultures such as Australian Aboriginals, rather than asserting ownership rights to land, invert the relationship and consider that they are in fact owned by the land. Spatial planning is a method of regulating the use of space at land level, with decisions made at regional, national and international levels. Space can also impact on human and cultural behavior, being an important factor in architecture, where it will impact on the design of buildings and structures, and on farming. Ownership of space is not restricted to land. Ownership of airspace and of waters is decided internationally. Other forms of ownership have been recently asserted to other spaces, for example to the radio bands of the electromagnetic spectrum or to cyberspace. Public space is a term used to define areas of land as collectively owned by the community, and managed in their name by delegated bodies. Such spaces are open to all, while private property is the land culturally owned by an individual or company, for their own use and pleasure. Abstract space is a term used in geography to refer to a hypothetical space characterized by complete homogeneity. When modeling activity or behavior, it is a conceptual tool used to limit extraneous variables such as terrain.
Psychologists first began to study the way space is perceived in the middle of the 19th century. Those now concerned with such studies regard it as a distinct branch of psychology. Psychologists analyzing the perception of space are concerned with how recognition of an object's physical appearance or its interactions are perceived. See, for example, visual space. Other, more specialized topics studied include modal perception and object permanence. The perception of surroundings is important due to its necessary relevance to survival, especially with regards to hunting and self-preservation, as well as simply one's idea of personal space. Several space-related phobias have been identified, including agoraphobia, the fear of open spaces, astrophobia, the fear of celestial space, and claustrophobia, the fear of enclosed spaces. The understanding of three-dimensional space in humans is thought to be learned during infancy using unconscious inference, and is closely related to hand-eye coordination. The visual ability to perceive the world in 3 dimensions is called depth perception.
Space has been studied in the social sciences from the perspectives of Marxism, feminism, postmodernism, postcolonialism, urban theory, and critical geography. These theories account for the effect of the history of colonialism, transatlantic slavery, and globalization on our understanding and experience of space and place. The topic has garnered attention since the 1980s, after the publication of Henry Lefebvre's The Production of Space. In this book, Lefebvre applies Marxist ideas about the production of commodities and accumulation of capital to discuss space as a social product. His focus is on the multiple and overlapping social processes that produce space. In his book The Condition of Postmodernity, David Harvey describes what he terms the time-space compression. This is the effect of technological advances and capitalism on our perception of time, space, and distance. 30. Changes in the modes of production and consumption of capital affect and are affected by developments in transportation and technology. These advances create relationships across time and space, new markets and groups of wealthy elites in urban centers, all of which annihilate distances and affect our perception of linearity and distance. In his book Third Space, Edward Soja describes space and spatiality as an integral and neglected aspect of what he calls the trialectics of being, the 3 modes that determine how we inhabit, experience, and understand the world. He argues that critical theories in the humanities and social sciences study the historical and social dimensions of our lived experience, neglecting the spatial dimension. He builds on Henry Lefebvre's work to address the dualistic way in which humans understand space, as either material physical or as represented imagined. Lefebvre's lived space and Soja's third space are terms that account for the complex ways in which humans understand and navigate place, which first space and second space, Soja's terms for material and imagined spaces respectively, do not fully encompass.
Postcolonial theorist Homi Bhabha's concept of third space is different from Soja's third space, even though both terms offer a way to think outside the terms of a binary logic. Bhabha's third space is the space in which hybrid cultural forms and identities exist. In his theories, the term hybrid describes new cultural forms that emerge through the interaction between colonizer and colonized.
Do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel and activate the bell button to receive all new